At the onset, I'd like to thank the Department of Archaeology and Museums and Somaya Vidyavihar for asking me to come here. And I would like to thank you all in advance for listening to me and apologize in advance for making you listen to me. Right? So I was asked to speak specifically on a museum of food for Maharashtra. Now, what is the museum basically of food? What is the contributor going to do vis-a-vis a museum of food? The question that you need to ask is very simple. Each and every one of us needs to eat to live. You might live to eat, that's a different issue altogether, but you have to eat to live. There are three things that every individual human being has to do to survive. Breathe, it's completely involuntary. Believe you me, you can't stop breathing because you want to. You might have enough willpower to pass out, your hindbrain will take over, and you'll start breathing again. Sleep, ditto, same. Okay, you'll pass out, your body shuts down. Eating is the only voluntary thing. You can not eat and kill yourself. There are some beautiful euphemistic terms for it, salle khana and others, but basically taking of samadhi is the same thing, starving yourself to death. It's the one surefire way of killing yourself. Jumping in front of a train is not guaranteed. Not eating, guaranteed death. It might take some time, but it will happen. So the point I'm trying to make over here is, despite this, none of us studies food. With due apologies to Somaya Vidyavihar, I would like to ask them whether they have a Department of Food Studies. They don't. Nutraceuticals is not food studies. You have a Department of Biology also. That's fair enough. But that still doesn't cut the mustard. Right? So for reasons that are completely bizarre, the entire teaching establishment in this country does not study food. And that includes catering colleges. Catering colleges teach you about ingredients, recipes, techniques, presentation. They don't teach you about food. They don't teach you about the archaeology of food, the history of food, the anthropology of food, the sociology of food, the fact that every single thing that you eat is political. You can list anything and I will tell you about the political implications of that. Every single thing you eat is political, but we don't talk about that. None of our political science departments have even a separate head in one paper called the politics of food. We just ignore the study of food in our country. And what's really tragic is there is perhaps no other place on this planet that has the variety of food and the consumption of different ingredients on the scale that the Indian subcontinent has. And despite all of this, we do not study it. There is no paper in the history of food. There is finally, I am told, in 2 sociology departments, a brief attempt to study food as an anthropology of food. I see that as some kind of hope in the study of food. The study of food is something that we just completely shun. And the reason for this is that we don't really showcase food. And this, more than anything else, is why you need to have a museum of food. Now, if there was to be a museum of food, where would you logically think it should be? Mumbai, Chennai, Kolkata, Delhi, right? When India finally opened its first museum of food, it's in Thanjavur. Has anybody here visited it? People have been to Zapurza, people have been to BDL. Has anybody been to the Food Corporation of India's Museum of Indian Food? No. Effectively, it's a waste of money then. Right? So, we have a museum of food. It's a pretty decent museum of food, but it doesn't have the footfall to compensate for the kind of money that's gone into it. It's just come up. Maybe there is, everybody's having a post-pandemic hangover, and we'll get around to it. So, essentially, a food museum is a space dedicated to showcasing, preserving food and associated paraphernalia, both tangible and intangible, in their original physical forms as replicas, photographs, digital reproductions, smells, sounds, so on and so forth. Now, how do you eat? Somebody in this crowd, stand up and tell me how you eat. Come on, take a chance. Gentleman with the red headphones. How do you eat? No. No, you don't eat with your hands. You first eat with your ears and your nose. Because you smell the food. You hear things frying, crackling, corn popping. Okay? After that, you eat with your eyes. When you look at that food. Then, touch comes into play. Be it, I don't know anybody who eats with their feet if they have hands. So that's being very sensitive about people who do not have hands. But we all eat with our hands, whether we eat with spoons, forks, knives, or just directly with our bare hands. Right? So touch comes in next. Taste comes in last. The last place that the food is eaten by you is in your mouth. And yet we keep going on and on and on ad nauseum about the taste of the food. Where we don't realize that the hook, it's the monsoon time, you're passing your chai wala, you smell that chai brewing, you hear him stirring that chai in his little brass container, you hear the sounds of him pouring it in the glass, you're already hooked, you already want a cup. The guy next to him starts putting bhajiyas into a kadai, you're sold. Right? So what I'm trying to say is that all of our senses, we engage with food. Every single one of them. And yet, we don't study food. We don't showcase our food. Can you imagine? Bombay goes on and on ad nauseum about the damn vada pav. Why don't we have a museum of the vada pav? Why has Bhavda Jilat Museum never put up a display called the vada pav? Seriously. If there's one thing that unites everybody in Mumbai, it's the vada pav. 99 out of 100 people love vada pav. 1% probably just disagree on principle. But never mind them. Right? So what I'm trying to get at is, it's about anything and everything that has to do with food. The kadai, the jhara, the gas cylinder, the gadi wala, the little kopcha somewhere, the paper in which is packed. Just like Vrinda was saying, it's about the entire paraphernalia of food. And all of it can be showcased. The history of the vada pav is beautiful. It goes back all the way to the 1970s. Oh my God, it's 70 years old. Does that give us enough for it to be archaic and put in a museum?
As per government of Maharashtra, anything more than 50 years old can be put as antiquity.
Including myself. So, why don't we have, I'm serious guys, think of it, I'd love to visit a vada pav museum. It could be just one room. You could have the whole history of the vada pav in a room and a small vada pav stall outside. That vada pav wala would sell more vada pavs than anybody else in Bombay. Right? So, a museum can be devoted to the food of a country, state, city, region, food group, specific commercial product, a soft drink, a spice, a commodity, anything. You name it. You can build a food museum comprehensively, in individual groups, in groups that you decide, sets, subsets, and even one-off items. There is one attempt at a utensils museum in Ahmedabad. Uh, it's one of the most horrible things for anybody who has even a modicum of understanding of a museum, where the problem with the private space is the gentleman wants to put in as many objects as he can into the square footage that he has. This is one of the nicer displays over here. And there's a room full of locks for some reason in the middle of nowhere. Well, but there are noodles about everything. One of the most amazing noodles in the world is the Kappa Noodles Museum in Japan. This is the Kappa Noodles Museum. Not only does it have everything to do with Kappa noodles, you can make your own noodles. It has activities for children where mothers and children come together and make their own noodles. It has entire noodle stations where, you have this whole thing, oh my God, don't bring food into the museum. Yeah, this museum is about, please eat while you're looking at the exhibits. It'll keep you from getting hyperacidity. So, things that you can't do in any other museum, you can do in a food museum. This is the Atlanta Coca-Cola Museum. It's got more things Coca-Cola than anywhere else in the world you'd think. But there are actually individual collectors who have more things Coca-Cola than the Coca-Cola Museum has. Because by the time they thought of building a museum, other people were already collecting stuff left, right, and center. They have an entire world beverage choices wall. They have all kinds of museums. The Americans love museums. The Europeans love museums. They're great places to go and spend time. This is a museum of mustard. Just mustard. That's all that this museum does. One Jewish gentleman who loved mustard so much that he decided he was going to create a museum of mustard. You see that entire display? There is not a single duplicate bottle of mustard in that entire museum. The only duplicate bottles are in the tasting session, where you can sit and taste mustards, where he'll do a master class in what mustard is for you, where he'll help you identify what your favorite mustard is going to be for the rest of your life. So, the Mustard Museum, can you imagine that? This is the Udon Museum in Japan. I mean, there's the Ramen Museum. I think about half a dozen ramen museums in Japan. But there's an udon noodle museum. Because what the hell? And those are all the bowls from all the parts of Japan where udon is served differently. This is the Indian Food Museum at Thanjavur. And if we need to look at all the different aspects of human life, I would love to have a museum of breathing and sleeping. I would volunteer to be an exhibit in the Museum of Sleeping. But yeah, a museum of food, something that we can't do without. We cannot consciously do without food. So a museum of food is just like any other museum. If you have a museum for the fine arts, if you have a museum for sculpture, if you have a museum for industry, why not a museum for food? It's a huge part of our identity. It defines who we are. You're from the Konkan, if you're not a Brahmin, you eat fish. It's virtually taken for granted. You come from the Desh, you eat vadi. Whether you like it or you don't like it, you eat vadi, whether you're vegetarian or non-vegetarian. You come from Gujarat, you eat bajro. You might be very snooty about it, but you'll eat bajro. Ringnaanu શાક ને બાજરાના રોટલા. Ultimately, that's what speaks to the soul of a Gujarati. It's like jalebi and fafda for breakfast. It's like the vada pav of the streets. It's like the omelette wala, hathgadi wala, the boiled egg wala outside the booze shop. So on and so forth. So, a museum is the perfect solution where people can come and learn about their culinary heritage and that of others. Food unites and divides. You have an option to come to a place where it unites. This is the Culinary Museum of India. These are some of the exhibits that they have over there. And I'm sad to say it's a really small museum. I wish it was bigger. I wish it had scope to expand. I wish those walls were around a much larger plot, but it's a beginning. Let's be honest about it. This is the first place. Hopefully it'll get better. They have a lot of VR display. You can put on these VR glasses that are on that interesting looking sculpture in the front, and they virtually take you to the food. Now, a classic food museum in its perfect state would not be 3D. It would be at least 5D. You would have smell and sound thrown into it. Imagine a museum where you can taste exhibits, where you got little pieces of blotting paper which you can tear off and taste Malwani masala, as opposed to, Goda masala. That's the difference. You know? It's not impossible. The technology exists to do this. Are we willing to do this? Do we have the vitamin M to do it? These are the questions we have to ask. So food museum is essentially a space dedicated to showcasing, preserving food, associated with paraphernalia, both tangible and intangible. The food we eat is a product of an enormous chain of events and systems, starting with farming and ending on our plates. Different communities have different diets, different ways. This is a typical Maharashtrian village home with a tiny little chula on which milk is being boiled. On the top is a Maharashtrian Khanawal in Baroda, because the Gaikwads went from Maharashtra to Baroda. At the bottom is a beautiful Khanawal in Nashik, where you still sit on the floor and eat. You're only given a stool if you're handicapped like me. Everything around us impacts our food. So, for example, when you look at this map, the terroir of Maharashtra, the coast, the hills, the plains, you have the Saputaras on top, you have the Sahyadris in the middle, you have the entire Konkan coast, you have the different fauna and flora of the Konkan on land and at sea. And all of this keeps changing. Every single community in India has a fat of choice. And no, that's not the kind of fat we're talking about. Okay? So, traditionally, the whole of North India ate mustard oil. The whole of South India ate sesame oil. Coconut oil was not really very popular out of Kerala. In the Northeast, they used fat in place of fat. It was all animal fat. Souring agents. Every single cuisine has its own souring agent, very often changing every couple of 100 kilometers, like on the coast of Maharashtra. From the tamarind to the kokum to the bilimbi. Just the length of the coast of Maharashtra. So your choice of spice, your choice of flavoring, your choice of starch, all of these things define you and your community and where you come from. And all of these depend on your terroir, on your geology, on your geography, on your archaeology, your anthropology, your sociology, your politics, every single thing that has to do with human beings. Every single subject that is studied in Somaya Vidyavihar, I can link to food. Every single subject. But none of these subjects teach food. The roadmap ahead is education. There was that lady over there who was asking what the roadmap was. The roadmap is education. And you showcase that education in a museum. So, what should we have in the museum? Well, you want to showcase the food of a region, because if you had to showcase the food of the whole of India in Thanjavur, in 4,000 square feet, there would be a lot of arguments about why you didn't showcase my food and why you didn't showcase her food and why you didn't showcase his food. Right? So if you want to do justice, these museums have to be regional. These museums should preferably have small local museums scattered across the length and breadth of the area that they represent. Okay? And what is very, very important is that these museums must have interactive displays. You have to be able to see, touch, smell, and taste. Unlike museums that say, please do not touch the artifacts, a good food museum will say, please touch the artifacts. Please fondle our potatoes. We change them every week. I'm serious. Okay? We'll have 3 expert chefs showing you how to slice onions and become a master of it. When you leave our museum, you take a skill set home. Simple things like this. How to wrap a modak. Every time you looked at a modak and said, oh my God, this must be damn difficult. Have somebody doing modaks. Next time you're at home and your mom is making modaks, you say, Mom, move over. I'll make modaks for you. Blow her brains out. Right? And make her proud. Especially the boys. Right? So the idea is to look at things. Now, since I'm an archaeologist, that's a scene from Sanchi. That's one of the most least shown images of Sanchi that I know of. That has, okay, a 4-legged quern over here, another 4-legged quern over here, and it has people winnowing over here. And it has people pounding over here. The entire process of chapati making is here. And the Buddha is here as the umbrella, but never mind that. So what I'm trying to say is that you have no idea where food is represented. Because the Buddha also had to eat. His last meal was pork. And when he had really serious indigestion after eating pork, yes, oh my God. Only in India we believe, no, it was mushrooms that tasted like pork. I've eaten a lot of mushrooms, guys. No mushrooms taste like pork. Everywhere outside India, everybody is very content with the fact that the Buddha's last meal was pork. Remember, Bhikshan Dehi, whatever you put in his bowl, that he will eat. Right? His last meal was pork. He died of indigestion, poor old man, at 80. And he told Ananda, he said, don't blame the guy who gave me the pork. It's not Chunda's fault. This was my karma. Chunda did me a favor by making me suffer before I died. So I wiped off any karma that I might have collected. So we got to be grateful to the man for feeding me bad pork. I wouldn't have been that kind, but then I'm not the Buddha. So just look at the progression from there to rotary querns. If you follow Sankalya's Nevasa excavation report, the rotary quern probably comes to India from outside. And it's the Romans who bring it to us. We adapt to it like it's going out of fashion. It's soon everywhere. In Maharashtra, we even have a rotary quern that's made out of mud. And we use a rotary quern specifically with our millets. When we want to turn our vari into variche tandoor, we use a zaatar that is made out of clay. We're forgetting how to make it, by the way, guys. And then, of course, here's Usha doing all the stuff for you today. So all of that is still food history. You know how much women have been liberated by simple things like the gas stove, the mixer grinder, as we call it in India, the mixie, the washing machine, the refrigerator. It's given women time. Of course, I've had people give me the counter argument that now they watch really bad serials on television with that time. But that's their time, and nobody else's business what they do with it. So we need a pop-up space where chefs and home chefs can come and showcase cuisine from all over the country, so that they're not just regional. You need workshops, research spaces, a cafeteria with a menu that changes. This month, Parsi food. Next month, GSB food. Month after that, we got food from the Adivasis of Nasik. Okay? Bring them in, give them a fully equipped kitchen, ask them what they want in advance, equipment that they need to bring, they can bring with them if we don't have it, and they can sell it to the museum. So we then have it. And the museum grows that way. A museum shop where visitors can buy select ingredients. Imagine going to a museum shop and coming back home and saying, Mom, I went to Bombay and I went to this amazing museum of the food of Maharashtra. And this is this amazing Maharashtra masala called Goda masala. And your mother, probably North Indian, will say, what? Ghoda masala? Masala for what? Cooking horse? And then you explain the whole thing because it's on the back of the packet. And it comes stamped with the Department of Archaeology and Museums logo. And it guarantees you purity. So, Dr. Garge is going to now start thinking about buying up shares in a masala factory and how to explain that to his minister. Ingredients, rare things, so much food that we stopped eating, so much food that we adapted to, so much food that came to us and came to us historically. I mean, Pushkar is right there, and he could probably give you a 5-hour lecture on the food of the Sultanate period. Okay? And drive your stomach muscles into a frenzy just listening to him. The impact that the Sultanates had on the food of this region is phenomenal. I went to this little town, well, it's in Karnataka now, but kind of greater Maharashtra. The Kannadigas can hate me for it, called Gulbarga. And we asked our driver after a really, really long conference where we could get a bite to eat. And he said, sir, do you eat meat? And we said, yes, very much. So he said, I'll take you to a place, you sit in the car, you don't come out because it's a bit grungy type of place. So we were like, meat, tasty and grungy. You hit all the buttons. That's where we want to go. And I had the most amazing chicken samosas I've had in my life. Chicken samosas, I hate chicken. Beautiful, large Punjabi samosa looking samosas full of chicken and garlic and onions and pepper and salt, nothing else. Super yummy. Who'd have thunk? Right? So, this is a place called the Food Library, and for some reason, Food Library is an incredibly popular restaurant name in India. If you Google Food Library, you would probably get about 40 places called Food Library in India. This is a place called Food Library, where there's a library and a bookshop just stocked with cookbooks and books about food, and various people collaborate with them and come up with products, and these products are then sold at the Food Library as a kind of social service thing. More and more and more museums all over the world are opening up spaces to do with food. This one over here is very specifically in France, and they're talking about chocolate and bread. This is one of those places that is on my bucket list. This is a pilgrimage place for me. It's called Books for Cooks. The entire shop is only full of cookbooks and books related to food. It is the #1 place in the world that people researching food and chefs and people who love food go to in London. And they have their own little counter where they serve really delicious stuff, and they don't mind if you use grubby fingers on their books. They think it only adds to the value. This is one small shelf of cookbooks. They do special tasting lunches with chefs who have come and used their place, learned so much, applied it elsewhere, who come back and showcase what they learned at Books for Cooks. So it's a very snooty club of people who get in. Well, they announce it. It's normally booked in about 5 minutes after they announce a lunch. But they even have their own cookbook called Favorite Recipes Books 1, 2, and 3, Books for Cooks. This young lady is doing a demonstration at the Smithsonian Museum. She's teaching food at the Smithsonian. Cooking Up History, presented in the Wallace H. Coulter Performance Plaza in the museum's innovation wing, which features a fully functional demonstration kitchen, the first of its kind at the Smithsonian. This, ladies and gentlemen, is in 2018. Can we dream of doing this at the BDL or the CSMVS? A fully functional kitchen space where we can showcase food heritage. A space for interactive cooking, live demonstrations, a living museum where you talk about communities, their history, over their food. People who eat together don't kill each other. It's a fact. Think of all those different things that you could showcase. The Koli ladies of Bombay, the cold drink making history that is Maharashtra's amazing hidden secret, vegetarian fish that the Parsis make. Vegetarian fish and Parsis. Yeah, it's a mithai. It's called Mawani Boy. The amazing kebabs that otherwise you probably wouldn't even know about from various parts of Mumbai and their history. The amazing farsan that Gujarat and Kutch have brought us. And well, ladies and gentlemen, a great place to spend the day with your family. Cooking, eating, learning, and just having fun. The Maharashtra Museum of Food.
So
Thank
when
you.
do we come to eat, sir?